Hi, I'm Rachel, and I wanted to do a book review on Factotum by Charles Bukoswki. And this is the first Bukoswki book I've ever read. I wanted to start making book reviews, and I decided that I would do it on the last book I finished, which is Factotum. I finished it about 2 days ago. It took me a day and a half to read, but that's because I kind of read nonstop sometimes if I get really interested in a book. And I know that Bukowski's more popular or well-known book is Ham on Rye, and I decided that I wanted to read Factotum first, kind of go in without really knowing much about the book, which I don't do very often. A lot of the books I read are books that are considered, part of classic literature or very well known and established, and I have some insight as to what the book is going to kind of be about. Factotum, I didn't know anything. I decided not to look it up and just to go in clean on a clean slate and read Factotum. So for those of you who don't know who Charles Bukowski is, he's a German writer, and in Factotum, it's somewhat autobiographical. He kind of writes about this alter ego of his, Henry Chinesky, who I've heard is also the main character in Ham on Rye, so I'm not sure if all of his books are, somewhat autobiographical like that, but Factotum was his second novel that Bukowski ever wrote, and the book was written in 1975, although it takes place in 1940s, I believe, and most of the book takes place in the Los Angeles area. That's where Charles Bukowski spent most of his life. I don't know if he was born there, but a lot of the streets, because I'm in the Los Angeles area as well, I'm not centrally in downtown LA or anything like that, but I'm in Los Angeles County, very familiar with LA. And so a lot of the streets and areas that Bukowski mentions in the book, if you're from LA, you'll recognize those streets, and it's something that's very familiar. And the main character in Factotum is Henry Chinesky, which sounds very similar to Charles Bukowski, actually. So you can just tell right off the bat by the name of the main character that it's going to be somewhat autobiographical. And in the book, Henry Chinesky, he is an alcoholic. So the whole book is about him struggling with alcohol and struggling to keep these remedial jobs, and he's hopping from job to job, losing them, sometimes based from alcoholism. There's also a lot of sex in this book, so if you like that, if you fancy sex, then, read this book. And it talks about a lot of the women his sexual experiences with women throughout the book, and he essentially goes back and forth between several women throughout the book. So with these jobs, he lies a lot on his resume to get the job, and then he's struggling to keep jobs throughout the whole book, but his main goal in the book is that he wants to be a writer. And so he submits writings and he gets rejected. And I don't want to give away too much what's in the book, although I feel like I just said a lot about what the book is about. Hopefully I didn't give away too many details. I might have. But this is what the whole book is essentially about. It's about just his everyday life, waking up, and him struggling, trying to find a job, him dealing with being an alcoholic. Well, not actually dealing with it, just, outright that he's an alcoholic, and his sexual experiences with women throughout the book. And a lot of people aren't interested in reading literature like that. I know that I don't know a lot of people who read at least the same books that I do, but I really enjoy reading books that are kind of depressing and, really focus on the tortured life of some people. And it's not, that they're going through some great tragedy, like, someone in their family is getting murdered, but it's just like the struggles of everyday life and how depressing that can be and how depressing life is essentially for some people. And I really enjoy books like that a lot because it's real, and I do enjoy reading for the sake of escaping into a book, escaping into another world, and, really becoming involved with the characters. But I also like books that are very identifiable and realistic, and I appreciate that. And it's the same with films. I love movies that don't always have a happy ending, and sometimes are, just focused on the mundacity of life. And this Bukowski book, I really enjoyed, actually. It has a lot of cursing, it has a lot of sex, it has a lot of alcohol, and it just kind of is this guy's life, and he's kind of screwed up, you know, he's kind of fucked up his life, and it's just him, you know, he doesn't even really try to deal with it, he just accepts it very matter-of-factly as this is his life, and he's come to terms with it, and he sees it, it's very normal to him, to Henry Chinesky in the book. But what's also interesting about reading Factotum is it kind of gives you some insight into Bukowski himself, and because essentially this is some kind of, you know, an alter ego persona that Charles Bukowski is writing about through Henry Chinesky, and it really kind of shows you some insight into Charles Bukowski himself and how what his views are of who he is, because this is essentially a branch of himself. I don't know if everything that happened in the book happened to Bukowski and if that's really how he lived in LA, but it can at least be assumed that that's how he feels, that he feels the way the character does, and maybe he, you know, was an alcoholic sometimes, and I don't know what the word is, but, you know, very, very sexual with a lot of women, which a lot of guys are. But it's a very interesting read, and I wanted to do this book review just to kind of start a discussion about it, let you know about the book. I don't know a lot of people who read. I don't have a lot of people to discuss this with in my life. So when I read a book and I'm very excited about it, or I want to have a discussion about it and kind of get some insights on it, maybe there's something I'm missing I didn't pick up, and I also like to share how I felt about the book. I don't really have anyone immediately in my life I can do that with. So if you've read the book, if you're going to read the book, if you have certain views, opinions on the book, or Bukowski himself, you know, just let me know. You can comment. The whole purpose of this video is to have somewhat of a discussion about it. But if you like Palahniuk, I think you would like Bukowski too. They're not the same. They're not identical by any means. But I do feel that the stories are somewhat in the same realm, that most of their stories focus on a central male lead character, usually older, you know, well into his adulthood, and dealing with the fucked up circumstances of his life, whether he made it that way or just turned out that way, and kind of the repetition of everyday life and how depressing and screwed it can be, and how screwed people make their lives for themselves. So I have some book quotes that I underlined from Factotum. It's just 3 easy quotes, and the reason I wanted to read these is because they're quotes that stood out to me when reading the book, and it's also to give you a sense of Charles Bukowski's writing style. These quotes won't give away anything from the book, so there's not going to be anything ruined by it, but these are the quotes that I underlined throughout the book. And the first one says, "Each day without solitude weakened me. I took no pride in my solitude, but I was dependent on it. The darkness of the room was like sunlight to me. I took a drink of wine." And another one says, more towards the middle of the book, says, "The myth of the starving artist was a hoax. Once you realized that everything was a hoax, you got wise and began to bleed and burn your fellow man. I'd build an empire upon the broken bodies and lives of helpless men, women, and children. I'd shove it to them all the way. I'd show them." And the last quote that I liked and stood out to me says, "For each Joan of Arc, there's a Hitler perched at the other end of the teeter-totter, the old story of good and evil." So that's just a couple quick quotes to give you a sense of Bukowski's writing style. And the book is a very easy read, so I would recommend this because it's not something that you have to decipher too much. You know, it's the title Factotum might be a little bit intimidating to some people who aren't familiar with Bukowski or who don't read literature very often, but the book is a very easy read. It's very easy to understand, and I feel confident that anyone could pretty much understand what's going on in this book and essentially what the main character is feeling. And I wanted to start a series of book reviews. If you like this book review, just let me know in the comments below. Comment anything you want to say about the book and any questions that you might have, and I'm going to try to post up book reviews pretty often for a while I'm going to be doing reviews on books that I've already read, and then once I run out of those, then I'll have to, wait until I read a new book and then do a review on that book and so forth and so forth. So, a bientôt.